Okay, hello, yeah, it's, guess who, it's Nick Dutch yet again. Alright, I've got in my hands the Christian New Testament and Psalms. Alright, this is the book which was forced into my pocket when I was in my first year of secondary school. I still have it, and I still have it for a good reason. There's an awful lot of interesting stuff here, which seems to relate to and correlate with my current path of being. Now, during the time when I have spent actually in churches and part of the Christian faith, which was many, many years ago, I can now look back and see that a lot of the reading has been very selective. As I mentioned in a previous video, you know, being a member of a religion can be the equivalent of being part of a hate cult, because it's all about we're the best and fuck the rest. Alright, forgive my bad language. Actually, don't forgive my bad language if I'm here to be able to say the word fuck. You know, there's a good reason for that, okay? Because I'm here to communicate a message to you, so all I'm saying is bear with me and hear what I've got to say here, okay? This is from 1 Corinthians 12. The beginning of chapter 12. It says, "Now about spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not want you to be ignorant." Okay, that's the first verse of chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians. Now, within the same chapter, namely the same argument, namely the same point of view, which is being expanded on further on, it says in verse 4, "There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit." Now, some of the people who criticize me personally, because I'm a practitioner of ritual magic, I'm a diviner, I use tarot cards, crystal balls and all the rest of it, say to me, be careful of the spirit that you're summoning, or be careful of what you're listening to. My point here is, what are you talking about? A lot of the people who levy this criticism at me, and at other practitioners of the occult and of magic, say this because they have been indoctrinated into the politics of religion, not into the religion itself. Because you've got to read the words of the religion and compare and contrast that with what you're told to believe by the guy at the altar, or by the guy who's at the pulpit and is doing his reading and doing his sermon. Alright, think about it. Now about spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not want you to be ignorant. Further on, there are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit. Now that shows that if it works, it's coming from the same source. The energy field, the force, the God or divine force is still the same. I've mentioned earlier on that, you know, if God exists and he can create physical matter, he must be so superior to us in every possible way. It doesn't matter what we call him so long as we acknowledge him, right? Okay, and even to a concept which is that superior, the word God itself must be a bit pathetic and a bit idolatrous, because this is a concept above things which humans can conceive of. That's why it's supernatural, it's spiritual, it's above and beyond everything. Now, if we go further on to chapter 14, again of 1 Corinthians. "Follow the way of love and eagerly desire spiritual gifts, especially the gift of prophecy." What is that talking about? It's talking about people who are deliberately, eagerly searching to be able to become diviners, to be able to become prophets. Now, some Christians would say, well, hang on a minute, it depends if you're prophesying in the right way. You're a fucking human being, and don't forget it. That means you're flawed, you've got prejudices, you can't think clearly, you've got beliefs, and therefore you're restricted. You don't know. For you to turn around and say to me, Nick Dutch, that you know best, that's blasphemy. That is true blasphemy, because you're going against your book. Yes, in some parts of the Bible there is political talk of saying we should kill these people, or we should hurt these people, or we should hate these people. But that's political talk. That isn't talk about God. That isn't talk about spiritual gifts. That isn't talk about the way the world works. That's talk about politics. And politics is divisive. In a previous video I've done a little presentation on the way that I feel religion can go, and that is to unite potentially unite all faiths under the agreement that the superior spiritual force is the same, and that would make sense. But it's when there is political division, that's when there is misunderstanding, and that's where I will be labelled a Satanist when I'm not a Satanist. That's why I will be labelled a black magician when essentially I am a spiritual healer. Alright, you've got to get this straight in your head. Read the friendly book, okay? It's there in black and white. I have not changed any of the words. This is the one that I was given when I was in school. And this is the Christian faith. The Christian faith is suggesting that I should follow the way of love, which I do because I'm tolerant to all faiths, and eagerly desire spiritual gifts. That means I've got to work for them. How am I going to work for them? I'm going to experiment. How am I going to experiment? I'm going to do prayer. I'm going to do meditation. I'm going to do yoga. I'm going to do ritual. I'm going to celebrate my concept of the supreme higher being through the ways that I see fit, so I can try and get results. I'm going to go back to the earlier parts of the New Testament. You know, was it St. Paul who said, test everything, trust that which is true? Well, how can I test everything if I'm just encouraged to sit down, shut up, do as I'm told, and stop thinking? My earlier videos are about teaching people how to think. They're about teaching people to be critical, to be objective, to be rational. Because it's only when you've got that in place can you actually understand the words of your book. Now, if you are a Christian, read it. 1 Corinthians 12 and 1 Corinthians 14. Alright? This is essentially a very important part of your traditions, of your faith, of your spirituality. I'll not have you turning around to me and saying, "Ooh, be careful of the spirit that you're getting it from." It's one spirit. Read the book. Now, I choose not to label myself as a Christian, because that's a label. Again, if God is superior, which I feel he is, if indeed he can be described as being a he, we call him a he because that's easier for humans to relate to. And realistically, that's probably a bit idolatrous, calling God he. It's definitely idolatrous to have any representations and to say that that representation is a representation of a person and that person is God, because God is above that. Alright, I will leave you to do your own internet research into that concept. I'll leave you to do your own literature research into that concept. Alright? Some people criticize me and say you've got to have just one master. Well, hang on a minute, I do have just one master. It is my God of my understanding that I have come to understand. If you're a Christian and you're suffering the conflict of faith, think for a minute. Have you been listening too much to the guy in the pulpit? Or have you been trying to expand and grow your knowledge of God through research in your own book, alright? Through prayer, through meditation, through changing the way you're doing your prayer and meditation, to coming to a more adult understanding of what your Lord is about. Alright, I still think the word Lord is a bit idolatrous as well. Higher power, maybe that's a better phrase. We got to think about these things and think about what it really means to us. Yes, if I'm doing prayer, maybe I want to if I choose to use the concept of Christ, maybe I want to set up a cross just to help me to think about Christian ideas. But I would not be celebrating the image of a man crucified, or indeed his life, as being God. That is an example of something which is okay, but it certainly is not cast in stone. If you consider the enormity of the concept of God which is in this book, and it is a vast concept, written by numerous different authors who had numerous different points of view, okay, so it cannot be the literal word of God breathed, can it? No, because it's written by humans. Maybe they all had a contact with the divine, but the human elements will get in the way of the understanding. And you can't have the full understanding because you're a human being. Instead, your understanding has to grow and has to grow with time. But start with reading 1 Corinthians, okay? Speak to you later. Bye for now.